There's a particular kind of quiet that settles over center court when a fairy tale runs out of road. On the evening of Monday, July 6, 2026, that quiet belonged to Alexandra Eala. 2 days earlier she had done something no Filipino tennis player had ever done. She had dethroned a defending Wimbledon champion. Now she stood facing Jasmine Paolini, a 2-time Grand Slam finalist who had been waiting her entire career for a moment exactly like this one. By the time the last ball dropped, Eala had lost 6-4, 4-6, 6-3, and her extraordinary run was over. But the scoreline barely tells the story. This was a match separated by a handful of points, decided by details so small that most viewers watching from their sofas, or from a packed public screening back in Pasig City, never even noticed them happening. This is the real story of why Alex Eala didn't win Wimbledon in 2026, and why the ending might matter less than what she built to get there. It's worth pausing on how Eala even arrived at center court with a nation's expectations on her shoulders, because the fourth-round loss makes far more sense once you see the shape of the season behind it. Eala came into Wimbledon 2026 in the form of her career. She had compiled a 12-4 record on grass in the lead-up to the tournament, winning her second career WTA 125 title in Birmingham and reaching the semi-finals in Berlin, where she defeated former Wimbledon champion Elena Rybakina and world number 8 Alina Svitolina back-to-back. Those results pushed her career record against top 10 opponents to 7-4 heading into the championships, with 3 of those wins coming on grass in 2026 alone. At the tournament itself, seeded 29th, a first for a Filipina at a major, she opened with a routine 6-1, 6-2 win over Mexico's Renata Zarazua, then avenged an earlier loss to Australia's Maya Joint with a gritty 3-set win in the second round. Then came the third-round upset of Swiatek, an 84-minute opening set that many considered one of the best matches of the entire tournament, decided in a tiebreak that Eala survived after saving a set point at 7-8. It capped an improbable turnaround for a player who, before this Wimbledon, had carried a modest 1-5 record across her first 5 Grand Slam main draws. To understand what happened on center court, you have to understand what came before it. 2 days earlier, on Saturday, July 4th, the 21-year-old from Quezon City had produced the biggest win of her career, defeating defending champion and third seed IGA Swiatek 7-6-9, 6-2 in a third-round classic that stretched past 2 hours. It was Eala's 7th career win over a top 10 opponent, and it made her the first Filipina in the Open era to reach the second week of a major. The reaction back home was immediate and enormous. The Philippine Sports Commission and the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority opened a free public watch party at the PhilSports Arena in Pasig City, with room for up to 8,000 fans, for her fourth-round match against Paolini. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., speaking to reporters during an official visit to Canada, called Eala a true inspiration for young Filipinos and said that because tennis doesn't get any bigger than Wimbledon, she had genuinely proven herself world-class. He would later add in a social media post that days like this, when an entire divided nation seemed to celebrate as one, don't come often. That is the weight Eala carried onto center court on Monday afternoon, a country's hopes, a maiden Grand Slam quarterfinal on the line, and an opponent who had spent 30 years learning exactly how to handle moments like this one. If there is a single thread running through this loss, it's the serve, the same shot that had carried Eala past Swiatek just 2 days before. The numbers from that fourth-round match, confirmed by the WTA's own match center, are stark. Eala landed only 55.7% of her first serves, 49 of 88, compared to Paolini's 70.6%, 72 of 102. Eala won just 48.7% of her second serve points, while Paolini won roughly 2/3 of hers. Eala also finished with 3 double faults to Paolini's 1. According to a report from Yahoo Sports, Eala's first serve dipped as low as 65 miles per hour during the match, the kind of pace that invites punishment rather than earns free points. This was not, by any stretch, a new problem. Swiatek herself admitted after her own defeat that Eala's slow, awkwardly timed serve had been mentally harder to handle than a conventional fast one, because there was no rhythm to fall into. But what worked as a weapon of disruption against Swiatek became a liability against Paolini, a far more patient and aggressive returner who stepped in and attacked the second ball relentlessly. Speaking on Tennis Channel afterward, 9-time Wimbledon champion Martina Navratilova didn't mince words about the serve, saying it was too soft, practically a puffball, and pointing out that Eala is physically capable of hitting it 105 miles per hour but rarely does. Navratilova argued that as a left-hander, Eala isn't yet using her natural advantage, the wide, skidding lefty serve that troubles right-handed returners, anywhere near as much as she should. During the match itself, a BBC broadcast graphic showed Eala serving out wide in the deuce court and down the middle in the ad court on only around a third and 37% of her serves respectively, essentially the opposite pattern a coach might recommend for a lefty looking to exploit an opponent's backhand. Not every analyst agreed on the fix. Former British number 1 Laura Robson pushed back on Navratilova's read, arguing that without more raw pace, sliding the ball out wide on the ad side would simply sit up and invite Paolini's forehand to punish it, suggesting the wide serve is only a weapon if it comes with real speed behind it. That disagreement between two respected voices is itself telling. This wasn't a simple, obvious mistake. It was a genuine tactical trade-off, and on this particular Monday, it didn't break in Eala's favor. Navratilova returned to the subject again after the tournament, speaking on the Tennis Channel about where Eala needs to improve most. Her diagnosis was specific. Eala, she said, is tall enough that her serve should eventually be at least as dangerous as Paolini's, despite the Italian being several inches shorter, and the raw tools are clearly there. Eala just isn't using her grip or her natural lefty spin to unlock them yet. Former British number 1 Greg Ruzetsky offered a similar read on his own podcast, framing it less as a flaw and more as unfinished business. Eala already understands how to mix up her serve, he said. She simply needs more accuracy and pace to turn it into the kind of weapon that dictates points rather than just starts them. That distinction matters. Nobody serious about the sport was suggesting Eala's serve is broken beyond repair. The consensus, across multiple respected voices, was that it's underdeveloped relative to the rest of her game, a gap between potential and execution that is common in a 21-year-old still just 2 years removed from her first appearance inside the world's top 150. There's a very human explanation sitting underneath all of these numbers, and Eala more or less confirmed it herself. Beating Swiatek was the single biggest emotional peak of her career to that point, and playing again just 48 hours later, on the sport's biggest stage, is its own kind of test, one that has nothing to do with technique. In her post-match press conference, Eala was candid about it. She said her serve simply wasn't as sharp as it had been in earlier rounds, adding that everyone has days like that and that it's part of accepting the job. She also noted, when asked about the emotional aftermath of the Swiatek win, that managing those feelings is part of being a professional, and that this wasn't the first time she'd had to back up a massive victory with another match only 2 days later. It's worth noting that some of the physical strain was visible, too. Eala had preventative tape wrapped around her forearm for the match, which she described to reporters as more of a precaution than an injury concern, tied to the length of an already demanding season. Any honest account of this match has to give real credit to Jasmine Paolini, because her patience is exactly what turned a close contest into a defeat for Eala. Paolini is 30 years old, a former world number 4, and was the 2024 Wimbledon runner-up, where she lost the final to Barbora Krejčíková. She arrived at this year's tournament off the back of a genuinely difficult season, a 12-7 win-loss record and a foot injury that disrupted her grass court preparation, and had even lost the first set of her opening match 6-0. Instead of unraveling, she steadied herself round by round, and by the time she reached Eala in the 4th round, she was playing some of her best tennis of the year. That experience showed up most clearly under pressure. In the decisive 3rd set, Paolini saved every break point she faced and closed out the match by breaking Eala's serve in the 8th game, moving to 5-3 before serving it out. Across the whole match, Paolini converted 4 of her 9 breakpoint chances, 44.4%, and saved 7 of 10, 70%, while Eala converted just 3 of 10 opportunities, 30%, and saved 5 of 9, 55.6%. Paolini also out-hit Eala on the scoreboard, finishing with more winners and, per Sofascore's match data, a 101-89 edge in total points won across the whole encounter, remarkably tight for a match that ended in straightforward sets. There's an added layer of irony here. Eala had actually beaten Paolini in their only previous meeting, in straight sets at the Dubai Tennis Championships back in February. This was never a gap in raw ability. It was a gap in composure at the exact moments that mattered most, and Paolini, a two-time major finalist who has lived through these situations before, simply had more of it in reserve. It's also worth remembering just how far Paolini had to climb to even be standing across the net from Eala that afternoon. Her 2026 campaign had been shadowed by the foot problem that flared up during the clay season, and by her own admission she had spent much of the year working just to feel like a competitive version of herself again. A 3-set win in the quarterfinal push against Maria Sakkari the previous round, completed in a little over an hour, was described by multiple outlets as her most comfortable outing of the entire fortnight, a sign that her form and her body were finally lining up again at exactly the right moment. Paolini herself later admitted her season had been a genuine roller coaster, saying she'd had to keep leaning on her team to get through the tougher stretches and was finally starting to feel like herself again on court. She also revealed that Roger Federer's presence in the royal box added extra nerves, saying she was actively telling herself during the match not to think about her childhood idol watching her play. Strip away the final scoreline and the match becomes a story of extremely fine margins. Eala broke back in the first set to pull within one game at 5-4, only for Paolini to break straight back and close it out 6-4. In the second set, Eala survived a 0-40 deficit on her own serve at 4-3, reeling off 5 consecutive points to hold for 5-3 and eventually level the match at 1 set apiece, arguably her best stretch of tennis all afternoon. The third set stayed on serve until the 8th game, when Paolini finally broke through. According to Philippine outlet Rappler, the key game featured a double fault and a backhand error from Eala following a second deuce, handing Paolini a 5-3 lead she would not relinquish. Eala fought back briefly in the following game but ultimately closed out her own campaign with 3 straight unforced errors, and Paolini served out the match roughly 2 hours and 20 minutes after it began. Reflecting on the loss afterward, Eala offered a simple but telling assessment. At this level, she said, it really does come down to very fine details, and in tight matches like this one, everything can hinge on just a point or two. Here's what tends to get lost once the highlight reels move on. Eala didn't just have a good tournament. She made history. By reaching the 4th round, she became the first Filipino player, man or woman, to advance that far at Wimbledon in the Open era, surpassing the 3rd-round finishes of Philippine amateur era greats Felicissimo Ampon, Raimundo Darro, and Cesar Carmona, records that had stood for more than 70 years. The run also pushed her to a projected career-high world ranking of number 28 and earned her £300,000 in prize money for reaching the 4th round, worth roughly $396,000 at the time, along with 240 ranking points, according to Wimbledon's official prize money schedule for 2026. She also handled the defeat with a maturity that impressed people almost as much as the tennis itself. There was no blaming the occasion, no excuses about the quick turnaround from the Swiatek win. Instead, she spoke about focusing only on what she could control, her own approach, her own game plan, and said that if she could face those moments with courage and a clear head, she'd be able to look back without regret. President Marcos, reacting to the broader run rather than just the result, wrote that even though this particular Wimbledon chapter had closed, the rest of the world was only beginning to understand what Filipino athletes are capable of. The technical gaps in Eala's game are real, but they are also entirely fixable. A serve that currently sits well below tour average in both speed and reliability can be rebuilt with training. A lefty who isn't yet using her natural serving angles can learn to. A 21-year-old who has already beaten 7 top 10 players, including a defending Wimbledon champion, clearly has the talent required to compete at the very top of the sport. What she's still building is the experience to close matches like this one out. So the honest answer to why Alex Eala didn't win Wimbledon in 2026 isn't really about one bad day. It's a short list of specific, correctable weaknesses laid bare on the biggest stage in tennis, against the most patient possible opponent, at the worst possible time to have them exposed. Eala herself seems to already understand this. She heads into the North American hardcourt swing, beginning with her Washington, D.C. debut in late July, with what she has called real belief carried forward from this tournament. The sense that every match now, she walks in believing she can win. Whether that belief turns into a Grand Slam trophy in the years ahead is still an open question. But after a fortnight like this one, it no longer feels like an unreasonable thing to ask. The tennis calendar doesn't leave much room for reflection, and Eala's schedule reflects that. She is expected to begin her North American hardcourt campaign in late July at the Wimbledon DC Open in Washington, a tournament that will also feature Naomi Osaka, Emma Raducanu, Madison Keys, and Marta Kostyuk, Paolini's own quarterfinal opponent at Wimbledon, among others. It will be Eala's first appearance at that event, and it arrives with a very different kind of pressure than the one she carried into Wimbledon. Not the pressure of an underdog trying to make history, but the pressure of a player who has just shown the entire tour exactly what she's capable of. That shift matters. Swiatek, Rybakina, and Svitolina all now know firsthand what it feels like to lose to Eala on a big stage. Paolini knows what it takes to beat her. The rest of the WTA Tour, watching from home the way Filipino fans did back in Pasig City, now knows her name in a way it simply didn't a month earlier. The scrutiny on that serve will only increase as more opponents study the same BBC broadcast graphics that caught Navratilova's attention, which means the incentive to fix it, quickly, has never been higher. For a player who was ranked outside the world's top 140 as recently as March of last year, arriving at a projected career high of world number 28 off the back of a maiden Grand Slam fourth round is, by any reasonable measure, a season-defining achievement. The loss to Paolini will be remembered fairly, as the moment the tennis world understood exactly where Eala's game still needs work. But it will also be remembered as the tournament where a 21-year-old from Quezon City, playing just her sixth major main draw, proved she belongs in the same conversation as the players she grew up watching on television, and gave an entire country a reason to believe her best tennis is still ahead of her, not behind her.